in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. For Graph Gurus 52, we're going to be covering our new Snowflake connector, and Raise and Monil are going to be presenting today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Raise and Monil.
Thanks, Emily. Hello, everyone. Today's presentation, as Emily mentioned, is on TigerGraph Snowflake connector. The presenters are myself, Raise Pasha. I'm the product lead for TigerGraph database. I'm responsible for TigerGraph database engine, language, and platform areas of the product. I have expertise and background in database management and big data technologies. I've held previously PM and engineering roles at Workday, Hitachi, and HP. I have a master's in computer science. Joining me on this presentation is Monil Shah. He's part of our solution team. He's a solutions architect, and he's been involved in design and implementation of graph solutions for most of our major customers. He has a master's in computer science from New York University, and he has deep experience building graph data applications for more than 3 years. All right, before we start the presentation, I want to go over some housekeeping notes. Although your phone is muted at this point, we do want to hear from you. If you want to submit any questions, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And this webinar is being recorded, and we'll upload the recording shortly after the meeting is over, and the URL will be emailed to you. And last but not least, if you have any technical issues during the presentation, please do reach out to us so we can fix them right away. All right, with the house items done, let's look at the agenda for today. First, before I go over the agenda, I want to first thank you, all the attendees who have shown interest in learning about how TigerGraph and Snowflake these two powerful technologies coming together to help you with your advanced analytics journey. On the agenda today, first I want to start off with the role of graph in today's world, especially in the connected data analytics space. What's the reason behind a recent spike in rapid adoption? And then I want to quickly give you an overview of the TigerGraph ecosystem offerings, because this connector is part of that larger ecosystem that we want to build. I want to give you a better understanding of how TigerGraph is expanding the ecosystem. Next, I'll provide a quick overview of the Snowflake connector itself, and also actually walk through a customer use case where a customer has successfully implemented integration and actually benefited a lot from a business analytics perspective. And then I will the presentation will switch over to Monil to do a live demo of the connector. And then we'll wrap it up with Q&A at the very end with some additional resources to help you get started. All right. First, just to give everyone, I know some of the attendees are new to Graph, so just to expand the scope and give a wider context of what Graph is and how it's playing a more increasingly prominent role in data analytics, I wanted to highlight a few things. Among the industry observers, there is a general consensus that there is compelling value of graph analytics, and this is something that's borne out by surveys, by industry research firms. And the reason for that is simple, right? The data itself has changed. No longer are the data simple tabular format data. Data has a lot more richness now. And graph technologies have a rich history. If you're going back to graph theory, especially in academic circles, they've been around for a long time. And even graph databases have been there for a while. But what has happened in the last decade or so is there is a lot more use of graph as a first-class citizen in the data management space. So the question is why? Why is that happening? Why now? That's kind of the question that we always get from people who are coming from non-graph background. The answer is simple. Businesses want to ask, complex questions now. They want to find out what are the hidden connections in data set that will allow them to gain more value from a business perspective. And this basically means the data is complex, and you have data and connections in the data, which require a different type of a database, right? A database that can model intuitively the rich connections in the data, and Graph is ideally suited for that. And it's clear that if you look at research firms like Gartner, they've consistently put Graph as one of the top 10 technology trends, and as actually as it is reflected across in adoption, we see in our own customers across different verticals and industries, that Graph is being increasingly used in to address critical business problems. Now, to further understand why, why is there so much focus on Graph? Like, from why is Gartner, IDC, all these research firms have been highlighting the aspect about importance of Graph. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture of the analytics space itself. As you can see, broadly speaking, analytics is broken down into the business intelligence aspect, which was called decision support earlier, more the OLAP space of finding out what happened looking at business results and trying to draw conclusions. And then you have what's called the advanced analytics, which is more about what will happen in the future, how data is modeled, how we can make predictions, where it's not sufficient to just know what happened, but what will happen, how can I be better prepared as a business to face those challenges. And that's where a lot of the new innovation is happening. And needless to say, that's being driven by the richness of the data. As the data connectedness increases, as the complexity of the data sources increases, you see that clearly the databases, relational databases or the legacy databases have not been able to perform. And it's not a knock on them, it's just the reality, right? They were not meant to address the use cases that are coming on board now, especially with predictive analytics, optimization, simulation, machine learning, and AI. All of these require special tooling, special way to model the data, which the databases that were originally designed for OLTP or OLAP would not be able to serve. And if you even try to extend those tools, the relational databases, to address the new use cases, the customers have faced a lot of problems in terms of operational performance issues. Just the solution development process itself can be very cumbersome. So that's why you need more a combination of both. You obviously have the need and will continue to need those relational databases for business intelligence or for OLTP use cases. But for advanced analytics, you need the special kind of data management technologies. And Graph is one of those, which definitely is right up there. And that's why you're getting a lot of that hype and praise from industry observers. Now that brings us to TigerGraph, right? Now, you make the case for Graph, and Graph is of importance. How is TigerGraph different? TigerGraph is not just a database; it's a platform for advanced analytics and machine learning. And by that, what we mean is TigerGraph addresses not just the aspect of a database, but it also addresses three key aspects. One, it allows you to connect all of your data sets, allows you to analyze that connected data that's in your database, and also learn from the data. I'm going to spend a minute on each of these. So when we connect, what do we mean? We connect all of the data sets that are both internal as well as external data sets, pipelines coming in. So the way TigerGraph is designed is to ingest data easily and incorporate that. And this borne out by the fact that one of our customers, who's a leading healthcare provider, is able to connect more than 200 data sources. And they're able to blend data and be able to do real-time customer 360 application that serves millions of users. And also we have a Fortune 50 retailer who's been able to build a customer 360 solution that basically blends more than 100 data sets. So one of the key aspects that we want to emphasize from TigerGraph perspective is the ability to connect all data sets, which is what the current topic of Snowflake connector kind of addresses. The second part is the analyze. How do we, once you have the data, and how do we analyze, right? So here, it's not just to analyze, get the data, but how do you get the insights from the data that's where the power of graph comes through, right? The way you store the data is very intuitive. The connections in terms of vertices and edges mimic the way the data lives in the real world. And one of our customers, who's a leading automotive manufacturer, was able to basically analyze this connected data and reduce the supply chain planning from anywhere from what used to take weeks down to an hour or less than an hour. And this actually has a real business impact, because with COVID, with pandemic, there's always been that extra stress on supply chain, and there's always a risk of supply chain breaking down. So it really helped them drive their business, and were able to get 3 times faster business value from the data as used to before before they adopted graph. And the last thing is, once you have the data and you analyze the data, but what can you do beyond that? How can you run advanced in database machine learning? And that's also something that's inbuilt in our database. And here, just to give a quick nod, one of our customers is a leading financial tech company, has built an AI-based application with all of machine learning in database machine learning without having to take data out for entity resolution. And this app actually gives you personalized recommendations, fraud detection, all of this stuff on an automated fashion based on graph ML algorithms. And this is just not a one-off. Actually, 7 out of top 10 global banks use TigerGraph for various entity resolution, recommendation, other use cases. So as you can see, the TigerGraph is trying to bridge that other half of the advanced analytics quarter, where they play a complementary role to your other traditional data management technologies. Let's take a quick look at how does TigerGraph enable all these good things that I spoke about. The quick thing is, in this diagram, the heart of the architecture right in the middle, I'm not going to touch that because that's the core product and that's not the focus of this presentation. It's more the side, the ones on the left and the right, the ecosystem that enables you to quickly integrate TigerGraph with other systems. So on the left, we have a number of loaders that we have built to easily ingest data from original source systems, be it or other databases, other upstream data management platforms that can easily bring the data in. And as part of that exercise, we have added the Snowflake connector. Beyond the parallel loaders, the Snowflake connector will give us that special ability to ingest data that's already resident in Snowflake. And one of the challenges with connecting data is there's 2 core challenges with advanced analytics on connected data. One is, how do you blend data from multiple sources? So you rather than create a connector or a configure for each data source, how do we do it in a holistically through one connector framework? That's something we are addressing. The second thing is, even the data sets themselves can be larger, varied, and some of them can be much smaller, some can be large. So basically, how do we handle batch versus trickle feed versus streaming? So all of these are things that TigerGraph architecture is able to accomplish easily with easy integration with other platforms. And the focus is not just on the upstream, but also on the downstream. Like, how do we, once the data is in TigerGraph and analyzed and we've done the processing, if you want to export to like downstream visualization tools or other for machine learning integration, or other even data warehouses, for example, to take the data out to a caching layer, for example, to serve as a data platform. So all of those are things that we have looked at, and that's where our renewed focus is, in terms of not just focus on the core database, but build an ecosystem. That way TigerGraph plays a vital role in terms of being a good citizen in your data management space. Since the focus is a lot on ecosystem, and as I mentioned, we have, we are going to do a lot more renewed focus on building ecosystem. I just want to give a quick overview of what TigerGraph system looks like, ecosystem looks like at this point, and what our plans are. From an ecosystem perspective, you can look at them as connectors. They are actually augmenting the core database functionality, right? Like how to make it easy to bring in data, you have connectors. To have language diverse, so you can speak to database in not just our query language, but through different programming languages. Visualization platform, so that you can look at the data in a meaningful way. And algorithm libraries on most common algorithms that are used across industry, how do we integrate them natively? And monitoring tools more on the operation side, like how do we make sure that the operational overhead is low? So all of these are subcategories in our ecosystem where there's a number of tools that are available, contributed by community, some built by our own team. But these are done more ad hoc basis. Now we're trying to organize them, classify them, so that users who come to TigerGraph can take advantage of them. So one couple more slides on ecosystem, just to give a little bit more detail on how we position them. Like for example, on the ecosystem side, we have four types of projects. Like one is a community project, which is our community contributed project. It is entirely owned by the community. We don't vet. So it's useful for things that are like, for example, if you have a utility that a particular user saw the gap and built it and contributed, those are the kind of things that are there in a community project. Next, what we have, what's called dev labs. These are offerings that are built by TigerGraph team, but not the R&D team, but our developer relations, our solutions teams. These are useful projects, that offerings that we see could be used for developer use, can improve developer productivity, for example. And then in an increasing order in terms of the maturity, we have what's called TigerGraph supported projects. These ecosystem offerings they meet some important strategic criteria, like for example, JDBC drivers, things of that nature, which are fit for production use, obviously have a lot of business value, but they're not part of the core product. One thing that I want to mention for the first three are they're all free. They're all open source. These are not part of our core product. You don't need a license to use them. But the fact is, the first two are community driven. The support is all given, is based in community. The third one is more, it's treated on par with the product, and any of the offerings as part of that would be supported by our support team. And the last one I want to, just for the completeness sake, I'll mention is we also have, as part of the ecosystem, a partner engagement initiative where we have offerings where we have a joint go-to-market initiatives with other partner organizations. In this case, those offerings would be separate and would be supported by partner organization itself. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because the Snowflake connector is not a one-off. It is part of our overall strategy to enhance our ecosystem and provide you with various set of tools, so that when you work with TigerGraph, you're not just dealing with the database, but you're dealing with the ecosystem. I just want to highlight the one example, because there's a lot of projects obviously across the board in ecosystem. For example, with TG community, there's like 40 projects that are already built by community. One example I want to highlight is Giraffle. This is a Gradle plugin to automate deployment. This was done by one of our customers, and they saw a lot of value, they contributed, and it's available for everyone to use. On Dev Labs, we have about 20 projects that have been built by our internal team, as I mentioned, and Snowflake connector, which is what we're talking now, falls in that category. And then TG supported, this is something that by our own TigerGraph R&D team. An example would be the JDBC driver. This is something that we've had for a while, and it's supported. Any issues using it, we treat that as if it's a core product. So we use that just to give you a sense of what's out there as part of the TigerGraph ecosystem. All right, let's go to the main part of the presentation, like Snowflake connector overview itself. Snowflake connector, before we go there, let me quickly talk a little bit about what Snowflake is. And a lot of folks who are here probably are aware of Snowflake, but I just want to highlight why Snowflake has been so dominant in the cloud data warehousing space. Obviously, from ease of implementation, it's cloud-based service, cloud-native service, simple to set up and get started. They allow auto scaling of instances, which means you can scale up and down based on your business needs. Low administration overhead, because infrastructure is already managed. You do not have to manage anything on your side. And then obviously they have built-in resiliency, so you can run mission critical workloads. and they're available on multiple cloud platforms, so it gives you a choice of deployment. But one thing where Snowflake cannot support is by design. They're meant for tabular data for SQL querying. So if you have a use case, if you have data that's very rich in connections, there's a lot of, so you will have to end up using multi-way joins, things of this nature to do deep link analytics. And that's where you kind of run into some limitations. And that's not a limitation, or as I said, a knock on Snowflake, but it was not meant for that kind of a use case, right? So that's where we thought, where we see that TigerGraph plays a complementary role with Snowflake. If you're already happy with Snowflake, keep doing what you do. But if you see a use case where you see Graph would be a great complement, then TigerGraph can be there to do the deep link analytic workloads. And that's where this connector will help you ease the pain of actually not creating a ETL pipeline or doing it yourself manually, but rather use this tool easily. So integration wise, again, this is quick, very high level overview of how we see Snowflake and TigerGraph working side by side. As I said, these are complementary technologies, right? TigerGraph has its own strengths, Snowflake has its own strengths. The idea is to bring them together based on a business need perspective, right? Basically, at the end of the day, customers who want to gain more value out of their investments, can bring these technologies together and based on a use case to use case basis. Our goal is to basically ease the integration pain with this connector, so that Snowflake users can easily move data from Snowflake to TigerGraph for advanced analytics. For this particular connector, we are leveraging Spark, and Spark is one of the most popular data processing engines, and it has seen wide adoption across the industry. So obviously, it was a no-brainer for us to use Spark. And the way we have built this ecosystem is that the connectors to different platforms can easily be plugged in to this framework. Now we have Snowflake as one of the data sources to this Spark-based connector system. We will be adding more data sources so that it's more a plug and play kind of a situation, which enables you to have more data sources, upstream data sources as well as downstream data sources through leveraging the same Spark cluster. Here's a quick overview of the diagram of the architecture. We've implemented a simple pluggable architecture through standard well-defined interfaces. In this instance, we have Snowflake as I mentioned, as a source system, but this can be extended to provide connectivity to other data management systems also. And this is the first offering. We're looking for feedback to add more connectors using the same approach in the future. Some key facts on the product. Obviously, this is Spark-based Snowflake connector. It leverages the parallelism built in both Spark as well as TigerGraph to do loading in parallel for higher throughput. And so you can configure the parallelism based on your needs and based on your workload demands in terms of the response time. And it leverages TigerGraph's GSQL loading language. So if you are not too familiar with it, it's very easy. It's SQL-like. So it's very easy to basically do a lot of the ETL logic can be implemented through this SQL-like language. And as I mentioned, it employs the user Spark engine. So you already have a Spark engine. You can repurpose that rather than stand up a new Spark cluster. And it's free and open source. Like all of the source code for the connector is open. If you want to use, extend, enhance it, contribute to it, all of those are options available. And it's available now. It's if you want to get started. I know we did announce this during Graph Plus AI Summit. At that time, it wasn't ready, but now it's available. And we're targeting advanced users at this point. Since this is the first time we're releasing, we're looking for more advanced users who are solution architects, application dev leads, who understand, who are at the design phase, and then and before we open it up to other users. And I've included the URL for more information later. Let's spend a couple of minutes on the use case overview. So the use case in this particular case comes from a life sciences customer that we have. And the use case was to increase customer engagement with a customer 360 solution, which is one of our popular use cases. The pain point for the customer was that with the data in their Other systems, it was hard to get a 360-degree view of customer interactions. Basically, the customer journey with connections to different systems was not well captured. And from a business value perspective, they wanted to understand the insights of churn, like why were customers leaving, for example. They didn't have a good way to get those insights. And also there was no way to get a temporal view of interaction with the customers, like what are the marketing touch points, where did they drop off, things of the nature. And in some cases where there was positive intervention to avoid churn, they couldn't run those campaigns in time because they didn't know what was that point at which they could run, as for example, a campaign. And lastly, some of the data was location based. So if they want to send recommendations based on some geographical view, that also was not possible with the way the data was in a relational database. So what the solution they did was they exported, they had a lot of their data in Snowflake data warehouse, and also data in other systems like HubSpot, Microsoft, Salesforce, and other applications. They basically used the connector to bring in the data from Snowflake, and also brought in data from other sources into TigerGraph. And after using a combination of deep link analytics and pattern matching, they were able to identify and recommend the next best actions. And they also used a visualization toolkit, which basically could customize and provide the recommendations based on whatever from a pain points perspective, exactly the information they were looking for. So basically, with this connector, the whole pain of incorporating data, moving data from Snowflake to TigerGraph, which would have taken a long time to build, was addressed in a timely and easy way. Basically the idea was that some of this was time sensitive, where they had to do it in a short amount of time, rather than having the team build this complex ETL pipeline. They were able to leverage this connector out of the box. And as to how that works, let's go to the demo part. Monil, my colleague Monil, will walk through the demo and give you some details. Monil, I'm gonna stop sharing. If you can take over and do the demo now.
Thank you, Rais. Hi, everyone. I'm Monil, and I'll be doing the demo today for Snowflake to TigerGraph connector. Basically, I'll first walk through over what are the prereqs required for this connector to work. And then we will go through how Snowflake database was built and what kind of tables we were using, and how those tables got converted to TigerGraph schema. And once we have that setup ready, we will see how we can work with this connector. So let's start with Snowflake. So for Snowflake, here we are using is test database with 3 tables, co-workers, friends, and persons. And the schema for each of them is fairly simple, where we have person with 1 ID. We have friends with person 1 and person 2. Just think of it as one person knows another person. And then co-workers is basically that if they have a different relationship between them. So if they might not be friends, but if they are co-workers. So these are the 3 table schemas which we have. And I'll go to TigerGraph Studio to see how we defined a graph schema for that. So we have a fairly simple schema here. We have a person as a node, where we have a primary ID as the actual ID of that person, or the vertex ID. We have a friend edge, which is an edge which defines the friend table to TigerGraph schema. And we have an is coworker edge, which defines coworker table to TigerGraph schema. Just to give you an overview, this is TigerGraph's offering Graph Studio, which is kind of a graph-based SDK where you can design your schema have data loaded to that schema and run your queries, everything into this studio. So the schema was basically designed using this studio, but we also provide a shell-based approach where I'll go through how you can visualize what kind of loading jobs and schema have been created. So let's go to first our Spark setup or the prerequisite setup. So we have a Spark setup, a server setup where we require a prerequisites as Java. So we have Java version, we have Python version, and also this particular instance has Spark setup as well. So we have Spark version as well. Now let's go to our TigerGraph instance. So this is the instance where I've hosted TigerGraph, and I have all my data on TigerGraph for the schemas and loading jobs here. So let me run this command to see what do we have. So this is the GSQL shell, which provides details like what vertex types are there in the graph, what are the edges. So currently I have just one graph, test graph. Also, I have loading jobs here to load the data into which vertex. So what column name should be mapped to which vertex. So that's my TigerGraph schema. And this is my Spark shell. Also, we have this Graph Studio. So now we have our setup of what prerequisites we require, what kind of schema we have created, what kind of tables we had. So now let's go to the TigerGraph for what kind of connector is built and where to find the resources of that connector. So we go to is developers.tigergraph.com. So here we have our entire ecosystem of all the connectors developed by community like TG Dev Labs. And then we have this ecosystem here where you can see that we have a lot of connectors here using TigerGraph to different kind of platforms. So you can go here and look for Snowflake. So this is the page which will lead to Snowflake connector. So as you can see that this is the Snowflake connector description where you can find how you can use this connector. There is a reference to a setup video as well. So if you're looking at a quick setup or a quick reference, you can reference this video. And then we have a page of resources. This resources page leads us to the documentation and the repository of TG Snowflake connector. I already have that open, so I'm just switching my tabs. So this documentation is a thorough documentation of how you can get started with this, what kind of prerequisites are required, how to connect and set up this entire demo from scratch. Also, I've created screenshots of each and every step and added to the slide deck, which will be provided to you later. And this is the Snowflake TG connector repository where we have our code base. So one thing I would like you to note here is that in that code base, you can go to assets, and this assets has two kind of README files, which will also give you idea about how to use this. And whenever you are planning to connect Snowflake to TigerGraph using Spark, your Spark cluster or the instance should have this shell script and two jar files required to run this demo. So if you are running this demo side by side and you already have a Databricks or a Spark setup, please feel free to add this to your instance there. Once you have all this on your Spark machine, we can go there, which is here. So this is the Spark machine we have, and I already have downloaded everything here. So I'll walk you through of how to generate a YAML file, which will generate this entire connector config file. And once we have a config file, we will try to run this connector and see if we can load the data or not. So as of now, here on TigerGraph, I have no data available for this schema. So at the end of this connector demo, we will have the data loaded to this particular statistics bar. So I'll go to the part where I have added all the shell script and jar files. So this is the place where I've added all this. And now I'll write the script, a command to connect the, to create the YAML file. So if you can see the command, let me just pull this aside. Yeah, so if you can see the command, it requires multiple parameters to be passed, like Snowflake user, password, schema, URL, also TigerGraph user, password, graph name, and loading jobs to be used. Also, there are optional configs available, like what kind of separator you want to use or what kind of details you want to provide, and that's provided in our documentation as well. So I'm going to run this. So as you can see, this has created a connector YAML file for us. So I'll quickly check how the file was created. So if you're following the tutorial as of live or maybe later, you will see your own details here and how this works. And this is the format of the YAML file which it would be created for. So once we have created this file and run this config file, now we can move towards running the actual Spark connector engine and see how we can load the data. So I think I'll go to my commands of how we can run this. So this is my location of Spark bin. So as you can see, it's on this location. I'm starting the primary node to get started. And once the primary node has started, I'll start a worker node as well to see if I have entire Spark cluster running. So once I start this, I can go to this Spark-based UI to see if I have everything working. So as you can see that I have one workers working here and there are no applications running as of now. Once we start or run any application, it will appear here. And once that application has been executed, we will have it in the completed applications here. So I'll go ahead and run the application to load the data to TigerGraph from Snowflake. So this is a Spark submit job, and I've already copied the command, which will be provided to you as well, how to run this command. And once I run this, I see it running. And then when I go here, I see an application running here as well on my visual dashboard. And once this application finishes, it will go to the completed applications, which it should have been done. So let's refresh this. So yeah, this is application which is completed. Now I can go to my TigerGraph and see that the data is loaded into here. And it was as simple as this to pull your Snowflake data into TigerGraph, and now you can explore graph, write queries, whatever you want to do with the TigerGraph Graph Studio to get the your analytics working. So I'll move back to the slides where I can showcase that I have created step-by-step screenshots on what steps to run, what prerequisites to check to see how this connector works. And we have a few additional resources as well. So I'll pass back to Rais to get you started with this.
Thanks, Monil. Yeah,
Yeah.
can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so basically the next is the call to action, like in terms of how to get involved, right? So as Monil mentioned, the link to the connector homepage is there, but it's part of the overall TigerGraph Dev Labs. I would highly encourage you to try others as well if you're a TigerGraph user. There, as you can see, there's a number of connectors, number of other projects that are part of our ecosystem. Based on your need, you can try. And I've also included the links here for the repo as well as the documentation. And once you use, and if you have any questions like help or support you need, you can put, there's a link to the community forum where there's a lot of users, active users, TigerGraph users, as well as our developer relations teams are always there to answer your questions you may have. And if you want to chat with other developers, like in terms of exchanging notes or we have developers chat on Discord. That's also very popular, and to get real-time help. All right, I think the next slide is Q&A. We're pretty much at the end of the presentation now. Let's look at quickly.
Yeah, there are some questions in chat, so if you want to look at that, I think Munil answered one of them. But
yeah, I can. Yeah, let's start with the first question. The question is about does that mean the client need to have Databricks? I guess this is the question is about Spark, right? The prerequisite of Spark. Do we need to have a Databricks setup, or can any Hadoop system serve as a proxy? Monil, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Yeah, sure. I can take that.
Okay.
As I replied in the chat that there is some kind of Spark setup required. It doesn't need to be Databricks setup, but prerequisites mention that you need Java, Python, and Spark setup to run this demo.
Okay. So one question, and then this one also, Monil, for you, pre-submitted question. So for the use case that we highlighted with the customer, do you know how much effort was that there? Since that was obviously a lot more complicated schema than the simple demo you did. How much work was it? Do you have any estimate, and how easy was it?
Yeah, I can vouch for that. It was not as complicated as it looks. So the customer demo which we did, we worked on our proper timeline of building the TigerGraph schema and having the table setup. But once the setup was done, having the connector pull the data to TigerGraph was not that much of an issue, as we already did the loading jobs and everything in sync. So.
And it's a one-time setup, right? And then after that, it was just a matter of running job to get data updates.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
okay.
It's a one-time setup, and customer can run incremental data loads to TigerGraph.
Okay. One question that I can take is about, I think, the support, like what sort of support can be expected. I think I touched on that a little bit, that this is, obviously these are part of the ecosystem. The support model is a bit different. And I talked about the different types of ecosystem offerings we have. This happens to be in the Dev Labs category, which means primary support is community driven. Our developer relations team would help. But as these projects mature, they get promoted to TigerGraph supported category, at which point, obviously, all of our customers will get standard support as if they have it with our core product. Till that point, it'll be a mix of community support and developer relations support. One question, this, Monil, I don't know if you want to take it or I can take it. Can this demo, the one that you showed, can this be done with a Snowflake trial account?
Yeah, I can take it. That's fine. So for this particular demo, you can use the trial account for Snowflake, for Spark or Databricks, for TigerGraph, and even with all the 3 trial accounts, you can get this running. So for the purpose of running just the demo, yes, that will work. But if you are looking for building an application which would run for a longer time, then you might need to get the memberships for all of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, the questions that I had. So I think this is a general, slide about resources as to where you can get information to get started. If you're new to TigerGraph, we have free TigerGraph Cloud account to get started, and we also have if you'd like to have a demo, our team can. There's a link to get a test drive online demo. And if you are interested in getting certified in TigerGraph query language, we have a certification program, education program that's that can help you guide with a lot of resources. And then, of course, last but not least, the community, which is part of a vital component of growing the ecosystem. There's a lot of our community has grown tremendously over the last few months with the renewed focus on ecosystem. We only see that growing further in the future. So I think this is the last slide, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. We'll send the
Yeah.
recording to everyone as well. If there's no more questions.
Yeah, if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us on the community chat. And I highly encourage everyone who attended. First, thank you for attending, and then also please do try and give us your feedback on the connector.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.